Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. I always have fun talking with my guests about hardcore business things. You know, we've talked about CRMs, we've talked about website, we've talked about social media, but I also love talking with guests about the things that are more important. You know, we can't be successful in our business, in our lives, if the things that are inside us are having issues. And so that's why I love talking to my guests about the subjects that we've talked about before. We've talked about a variety of things, immune systems. I had a hypnotherapist on, you know, all sorts of things like that, because that is more important than can you do a spreadsheet? Can you do a website? All of those various things. And so please join me in welcoming our guest, Beth Gibbs, to our program today. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, we chatted for, 30 minutes before the program ever even started. So clearly we're going to have a great time. But let me tell people just a little bit about you. So Beth Gibbs, MA, is a certified yoga therapist. She is free-tired and pursuing her passions of writing, teaching yoga, and leading workshops on personal growth and healthy aging. Her published writing includes newsletters, short stories, and magazine articles on the benefits of yoga, meditation, and self-awareness. She uses her energy and sense of humor to inspire, inform, and entertain. Currently, she writes for the blogs Yoga for Healthy Aging and YogaUOnline. She is the author of Ogi Bogi, the Elephant Yogi, a therapeutic yoga book for children. Her latest book, Enlighten Up, Finding Clarity, Contentment, and Resilience in a Complicated World, is a contemporary look at a 3,000-year-old self-awareness model. So again, Beth, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we'll talk about your book in just a minute and you know, all of the subject matter, but I always like finding out how my guests got to where they are now and how you discovered that this really is your passion in life.
Right. Well, I was interested. I've always been someone who liked to move physically. So I was a dancer, amateur in college and so forth. And then after I married and had kids, those kind of activities became less easy to do. And so in searching for something else, I went to one of my favorite places, which is a brick and mortar bookstore. And I found a book by the late Richard Hittleman titled A 30-Day Yoga Program. I was intrigued. I took it home because I'm an introvert. I practiced by myself. And then a few years later, I was on vacation with my family, and the people we were visiting, the wife said, "Hey, how would you like to go to a yoga class?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, Rinda." But she dragged me, and I was hooked from the minute I set foot on the mat, because I felt connected to the other people there, which you don't do when you work on your own.
Right.
And there was just something about the energy of the group. So that started the journey. And then when I decided to go for training, I found integrative yoga therapy, which was founded by Joseph LePage. And I went to his 200-hour yoga training, and I chose it because there was no guru. And because I have a problem with authority figures telling me what I'm supposed to do. And
what's right and what's wrong.
Thank you. And when I talked to Joseph, I said, my first question was, is there a guru in your program? And he said, no, there's just me. And And his program is set up, it's called Integrative Yoga Therapy, because it doesn't say, these are the postures, you will all do them like this. It says, I have some postures and exercises. Let me see who's in front of me. Let me see what their needs are. And then let me modify and make a variety of ways for people to actually embody what I'm trying to teach. So most of my classes are mixed. I have all ages. I have some people in a chair, some people on the floor. So it's integrative. It's what can I do to help you be your best?
I love it.
Participate in the class. So that kind of got me started after the 200 hours. And that's when I first learned about this model of the 5 layers of self-awareness. In Sanskrit, it's called Pankamaya Kosha model, but I avoid the Sanskrit because it confuses people. I just call it 5 layers. And at first I was like, what's this? And he would talk about it and I heard it in my mind, but it took me about 9 months for me to embody it and really feel it so I could teach it. And when I got it, finally, it was like, whoa, this is really a cool way to move through the world and to help other people move through the world. Because ultimately, if you've got an issue or a problem, there's only 3 things you can do about it. You can either change the situation. If that's not possible, you can change the way you approach the situation. And if that's not possible, you can find a way to be at peace with it. Or, and sometimes there is the 4th, you can leave.
Right.
So Right. So I've been working with this model since 1992.
Wow.
Yes. And when I went to write the book, because I like to do research. And while I was really embodying this, I said, well, who's writing about this? Because I'm a reader. Right. And I went online and I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked and I found only one book.
Wow.
Written by a yoga master, BKS Iyengar, who has transitioned from the planet, but it's steeped in yoga tradition, yoga philosophy, and Sanskrit. There were a couple of other pamphlets, but they were steeped in yoga tradition, yoga philosophy, and Sanskrit. So I said, I'm going to write what I need to read. And that's what I did.
I love it. I love it. Well, in the book, you talk about self-awareness. I mean, that's, and I'm sure a lot of people listening or watching this just went, what's that mean? I know I'm here. I'm but what really do you mean by self-awareness?
I think that you can look at self-awareness in my mind in 2 ways. One is the first way where you get out of bed in the morning and you say, okay, I'm feeling okay. My back's okay. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to put something on my body that's going to look good when I go into the office. So you get that level. The level that I'm really working with is the ability to see, understand, and accept the way we think, what we think about, our beliefs, our habits, and our behavior without judgment and with compassion, and then begin to figure out, well, why do I feel that way?
Right.
Where does that come from? How did this happen in my life? Because when we are able to do that, we get to a point where we get clear on what our issues are, and we have a better handle at figuring out how to manage them. And when we do that, we're able to find better solutions for whatever the problem is. We make better lifestyle choices. And especially for folks who work in business, we learn how to manage that stress. We can improve relationships that can be improved. We can end toxic relationships that cannot be improved. We reduce our worry. We understand what we are afraid of and what makes us angry. And we lessen the tendency to judge ourselves and others. And we learn what we can control and what we can't control, and we learn how to relax consciously. Right. And relaxation is not plopping on the couch with the remote control. Conscious relaxations means you are very aware, but you're mellow and chill at the same time, which is a very unique state of affairs. And I've had people say to me after class, because we always end classes with 10 minutes of either guided or deep relaxation. And I've had people come up to me afterwards and say, what was that? I felt really good, but I felt really relaxed, but I was really awake. And it's just,
Right.
it's lovely when that happens. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what self-awareness is in my mind.
Right. And which for many people is absolutely terrifying. You know, they don't want to know what makes themselves tick, because that's scary. I mean, you know, and there's obviously, you know, many things. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, we always talk about is, you know, those little voices in our head, you know, and those little voices in our head for many people are negative little voices. You know, they're telling us, you can't do, you aren't good enough. All of those various things. And unfortunately, a lot of those little voices came from when we were little, and a parent, a teacher, a whoever, in many ways meaning well, because they wanted to protect us. They wanted to keep us safe. You know, it's the don't touch the hot thing. You know, don't strive for a goal that you really shouldn't have. Oh, girls don't do that. You know, and then unfortunately, those little voices get incorporated into everything that we do. And so how, you know, when you're working with people and I'm guessing, you know, obviously, if they've come to you, they have the realization that they need to be working on this.
Well, actually, some people come simply because they have a pain in their back. Or they have high blood pressure.
Okay. And because the yoga is
Exactly. So they come for the reason I started doing yoga, which was to relieve something that was happening in my physical layer, which is the first layer. And eventually we get onto that, just to refer back to your example of those voices in the head and not being enough. When by the time we get to, well, let me just quickly list what the 5 layers are.
Okay. Yes.
There's the physical body and your environment. Then there's your breath and your energy, which are all the same thing. Then there's the mind with your emotions and your habits and your beliefs. Then there's intuitive wisdom, which we call the witness. And then there's bliss. So people have no problem understanding the physical level. They get the breath, but they're not quite sure about this energy thing. And I just recommend reading a physics book for dummies, because that tells you that we're all energy and star stuff. So we just vibrate at different levels. That's all. And then when they get to the mind and the witness, there's usually confusion. So what I've figured out is what I hope is a good analogy. If you think of a Venn diagram, you know, you have 2 separate circles, and you figure those circles are overlapped by about maybe 40%. And then, so that idea, that little voice that says, I'm not enough. If the mind recognizes that and it says, I'm not enough, I really can't do anything. And it might express that feeling in self-sabotaging ways. Intuitive wisdom, if you're got to the point where you're actually working with that layer, it knows where those messages came from, and it knows that it's not true, and it's trying to get that message through the overlapping area where those circles overlap. If it manages to do that, because you've tuned into it, you go like, oh, that's where that came from. I remember who said what. I remember when this happened. I remember when that happened. And I know it's not true. And you begin to work from that level to free yourself from that. And when you do, your self-awareness increases exponentially. But it's work, but
you know, and obviously it's, you know, you're delving into things that are painful. I mean, you know, if it's a good thing, well, you know, that's great. But yeah, we're going into things that are painful, and you know, and of course our physical is so much controlled by our brain. You know, and our breath too. I mean, you know, it's interesting. I went yesterday and got my COVID shot. Yay! You know, and you know, I'm now, somebody wants a COVID shot, they should get a COVID shot. They don't want a shot, fine. You know, but my doctors say you go and do that, so I follow them. But I realized after I got the shot that I was lightheaded. Now, it was not from the shot. It was because I'd held my breath.
Aha.
And, and part of that was because, I'm getting owie. Now, I mean, she was so good. She had the Band-Aid on before I even knew that she was doing anything.
Right.
And so, but my mind worked me into a state of my blood pressure going up, all these various things. And luckily I realized, dingbat. And so then I started taking deep breaths. I started calming myself back down. And then of course everything was fine. But yeah, our brain does all of these things. I mean, like,
and sometimes it's the body. I have found that in my experience from my life, up until I hit menopause, my mind could control everything. Menopause hit, and I realized pretty quickly that I was going to have to listen to my body.
Oh, yeah.
And when my body said, sit yourself down,
yes,
I had to learn how to do that.
Right.
And because, as we age, things change in the
things
body.
don't work the way they used to.
They don't. And if we don't take the time to understand that, we're still doing the same old thing that we've done our whole life and creating more problems for ourselves. Because these whole 5 layers of self-awareness, that this 3,000-year-old model that comes from East Indian wisdom tradition called the Upanishads. And they were written around the time that people began to say, I'm not so sure I want to let somebody else outside myself tell me what to do and how to live. I think I need to look inside a little bit more. So when that began to happen, one of the Upanishads, I think there's 13 of them. This particular one, the Taittiriya Upanishad, laid out in very poetic terms what these 5 layers of self-awareness are. And that's it is, I guess, comforting to me to know that it goes back that far, that it's been existing for this long. So it can't be, somebody's idea of
it's not a quick fix.
Exactly. It's not, and it isn't. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I always tell people, though, if you're approaching something that is really, 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 really painful, you can do 2 things. 1, go get professional help. 2, in your mind, you can create a visualization where you visualize and erect a glass wall between what you're afraid of and what you want to see. And that provides a little distance, because bringing in the intuitive wisdom does require you having a little distance from what you're watching, so that it's like meditation.
You kind of become the unbiased
in the mind, because people say, well, I can't meditate because I can't quiet my mind. Of course you can't. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is you make a decision to either be self-aware or to sit down and meditate or do exercise or eat healthy or take an exercise break at work when you're feeling stressed out. And then you set aside the time and you decide what you want to do. Then you have to release from the outcome, because it is what you'll expect, less than you expect, more than you expect, or the unexpected.
Right.
Absolutely.
And clearly there are times where you obviously have to be paying attention to your body.
Yes.
I mean, there are obvious things, a broken limb, bleeding, things like that. But again, how you deal with that is still in your mind. If you see it and immediately, and if you're bleeding and you can panic, or you can think, oh, okay, let's take care of this. And obviously, there's lots of things, but and I always say, it takes a combination of Eastern and Western philosophies.
Absolutely.
Years ago, we raised dogs, and we had someone come to our dog club, and this was in Boulder, Colorado. And, we kind of all know what Boulder, Colorado is like, and this veterinarian came and he was a holistic vet. He did acupuncture, he did all sorts of things. And I mean, it was a fascinating talk. I mean, clearly I remember it, and it's almost 30 years ago, probably. But I still remember he said, if a dog gets hit by a car and needs surgery, I can't go humana over it. The dog needs surgery.
Exactly.
And he said, and same thing with nutrition. He said, if your dog does good on, at that point, the Kmart special, feed them the Kmart special.
Right.
He said, but if they need a different nutrition, then you have to feed that differently.
And that's absolutely true, because I know that, well, in terms of dieting, haven't we all done all kinds
and you talk
of
about
diets?
this in your book.
Yes, because people say, well, you should do this and you should do this and you should do this. And my attitude has always been, well, I did all those and some worked and some didn't.
Right.
And, but it took trial and error until I finally found what was going to work right for me. And that doesn't mean it's going to work right for me forever, because as you had mentioned before, things change as you age, especially the digestive system. I used to be able to digest rocks. Now I can no longer digest rocks. So when my body says, you should not have put that in your mouth because I'm going to give you some problems, then I know that next time I don't put that in my mouth.
Right.
So,
or you make that decision. I mean, I was sharing, I have some health issues. And so part of that is, based around what I eat. And I remember, my surgeon told me, he said, eat it. If it works, that's fine. If it doesn't work, don't eat it again. But I also think, okay, my body doesn't like steak. I like steak. So I can make the decision, okay, I'm going to have steak once a month and enjoy it and then be miserable for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, but I rationalize, I go through it all and I think this is the way it's going to be.
But that's the whole point. It's like, for instance, I have a chocolate drawer, and I keep a certain amount. I have probably a 6-month supply of dark chocolate in my refrigerator.
Oh my!
And then I have a chocolate drawer, which I, get at room temperature so I can eat it. Now I know that when I get an urge to have chocolate, I have a choice. I can either just put my hand in the drawer and pull out the chocolate and eat it. And if it's after 3 o'clock, like you said, I'm going to have a problem.
Right.
Or I can say, why am I getting this urge now? What am I watching on TV? Is there a commercial with cakes and candies and so forth? So if you stop and understand where's this urge coming from, and then you make that conscious choice, like you did with the steak, either I'm not going to do it or I'm going to do it and I will accept the consequences. Right. It's a conscious choice.
Right. Well, and of course, the same is true with stress eating. With unfortunately to some degree addiction, all of those various things, it's, and I know that there are chemical things that are going on in your body, but as they say, like in AA, if you don't want to be here, right, it's not going to matter how many people told you you need to be here. That's right. And so, it really is, it comes back to, just how powerful your mind is.
And the other thing that's very interesting is because the mind is also in the body. It's not just the brain. Right. There's a difference between, the Western mind-body model. It says mind, it says body. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. This Eastern model says you have 5 layers to pay attention to. And if you pay attention to your physical body, your breath and your energy, your mind and your emotions, you encounter intuitive wisdom and you find a way to just chill it all out. You have a 360-degree view of yourself, which allows you, in my mind, a greater foundation for self-exploration and self-awareness than just to think mind and body. But ultimately they, I always tell people, here's an example. I was doing a workshop on blood pressure some years ago. And I was talking about the 5 layers of self-awareness and talking about how, I tend to start with the body because, as I said before, that's how most people relate to being alive. And one of the women in the audience said, well, her teacher had told her that you start with the 5th layer, the bliss layer. From a spiritual, existential standpoint, that is true. However, all those 5 layers are all interrelated. Right. So it doesn't matter who or which one you start with, you are always impacting everything else. Right. And your job in terms of your self-awareness is to say, how is this impacting my physical body? What's happening with my breath and my energy? What's going on in my mind? And can I trace this back to something that's impacting this? And then can I let it go? Yeah. Right.
And what's important to note is this is throughout your life. it's your personal and it's clearly your business life also.
Absolutely.
Things happen at work, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with stresses? I worked for a man years ago who was a large man. I mean, I'm guessing over 300 pounds. I mean, he was, and his stress level was off the charts. I mean, he was just, and he was a stress eater. And unfortunately, the business, we were candy brokers. So we literally had a warehouse of sugar and chocolate. My dad thought it was the greatest job I could have in the world because I could bring him cases of candy bars. But, and so when this man got really stressed, he would go into the warehouse and just literally, I mean, he would eat the wrappers even, and we would find he'd like rip half of a candy bar in half and we'd find the other half, and all of these things. And, it was just, you just wanted to tell him, take a breath, calm down, let, is it really the end of the world? But I mean, he was just so stressed that there was no way to deal with it. And so it was, I was there for a couple of years and then it was like, I just can't do this anymore. And, I mean, I got out and, this was back, this was, I knew he would not react well. I mean, this was just, but I still wanted to be paid for a couple of weeks and things. And so, this was back when you had one computer and everything else was connected to it.
Absolutely.
I had the one password. And so when I went in and told him I was leaving, and I gave a month's notice, I mean, I wanted to, and he screamed at me and he yelled at me and he called me names. And I said, you understand I have your password and you don't. You're going to be nice to me. And he actually, and then he immediately kind of took a step back.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all are dealing with stress at business.
Absolutely.
And good things too.
Absolutely.
And that's
stress is going to happen because we wouldn't be alive if, if our bodies weren't being stressed. The problem is when stress comes from things that really upset the natural, calm, biological, physiological stress, and then become chronic. That's when it's really a problem.
Right. Yeah. And we've worked with people like that. We may have been people like that. I think that's why a lot of times people leave and become small business owners. They're like, I just can't deal with that, whatever anymore. But it's as a manager, as a leader, that's where it's so important that you go through this. And I don't care, maybe you're a business of one, fine. You don't want to be yelling at the cat all day. But that's where it's so important that you're following all of this, because it's just as important in your business as it is in your personal life.
Oh, it's crucial in the business world. And that's why I think more corporations and small businesses are hiring either yoga teachers or coaches or health professionals to come in and show their employees how to handle the daily stresses, what little exercises they can do, what little breath techniques they can use, how to do some simple stretches in the chair. You do not have to put on spandex and roll out a yoga mat, in the break room. You can just do it right in your chair. Matter of fact, I recently did I think it was a 6-week session with the town employees that included the police chief and the fire chief. Of course, it was fun. But it was fun. And I said, you don't have to get down on the floor. I'm going to show you simple things you can do seated in your chair. You can take a 5-minute stretch break. Even if you're in if you're in a cubicle setting, and of course, if you're a manager, you can close the door and really lay out. But there are things you can do for each and every layer: stuff for your body, stuff for your breath, stuff for your mind, and the other 2 layers will hopefully just kind of come right along on the ride.
Right. And it's interesting. Your book was published in 2020. I'm assuming that it was published before the pandemic really hit.
Well, it was written in its entirety. Well, actually, it was written because I had been working on this book for 3 years, and I somehow just never found the time to put it totally together. Pandemic hit. classes are canceled.
You
Social
had time.
activities are canceled. I had time. So I was able to pull it out because writing keeps me sane during these times. So I pulled it out, I put it together, and I said, I'm going to do the whole schmear. So I spent several months trying to get an agent, then trying to get a traditional publisher. Then I found Emerald Lake Books and a hybrid partnership, and boom, here she is.
Right.
It's done.
Right.
Out. Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, it's obviously a book that was timely.
Yes.
Because of the pandemic.
Yes.
You know, and because, I mean, let's face it, there's so much that is completely out of our control. So what can we control? You know, and you know, I always love it when, you know, initially we were told, you know, lock everything down for 2 weeks, everything will be hunky dory. All of us went, seriously? 2 weeks is not going to do it. But, you know, the whole world shifted. You know, in a lot of ways, it reminded me of September 11th. You know, everything just overnight went kabwonk. You know, and our foundations were shaken, you know, because we no longer could function the way we had always functioned. You know, whether it was business, whether it was home, whether it was that whole big combination, because, you know, all of a sudden you're home and your kids are home and your spouse is home and, you know, all these various things. And, you know, and I think that we've clearly seen that stress levels have gone up. I think they're coming back down because I think people are getting used to it. They're like, oh, okay, this is just the way it's going to be. So now we're going to be okay. But, you know, it is still difficult because, you know, there's still so much uncertainty.
Yeah, and it's much harder, unfortunately. Well, it's hard on everybody, but from what I've been hearing, it's doubly hard on women because more women have lost their jobs. And when they're at home, they still have more responsibility or take on more responsibility.
Oh yeah, all of a sudden they had to become teachers.
Or they have to because they don't have anybody else in the house but them. They have to become the teachers and do everything. So it's just very difficult. And I think when this is over, I think a lot of people are going to need some additional help figuring out how to return to normal and how to function in this new normal, whatever this new normal is going to look like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because I think, you know, a lot of it is, you know, I don't fall into the category of saying people are fearful about getting sick. You know, yeah, there are. I mean, there are people who are just, but I think for the most part, we're concerned.
Yes.
You know, and it's a healthy concern.
Yes.
You know, it's okay. I'm going to wash my hands 900 times a day. I'm going to wear my mask and, you know, and I'll stay, you know, 4 feet from you. And I think now probably part of the issue is that we've gotten used to this. So, you know, we're still COVID cranky, but you know, it's like, see,
I'm going to add that.
You can add that to your, yes, we get COVID cranky. But, you know, we've adapted, which is what we're supposed to do. You know, and you know, and I don't ever see us going back to what it was in January of 2020. You know, I think companies went, ooh, this is really working pretty good. And we don't have to pay rent. You know, we might have to make sure, obviously, that they have the right resources. You know, everybody went home and went, well, I don't have a computer. I don't have internet, you know, or I'm having to share it with 5 other people in the house. And look, I got 3 kids that are home too. You know, and so they're figuring all of that out. I'm just as happy as can be networking online. You know, the thought of dressing up and driving and eating whatever that meal is. Now, most of the meals that I have down here, oh my gosh, you know, Southern cooking.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. You know, love it. But, you know, and so we're all going, man, you know, this okay. But it does cause that additional stress. You know, we were talking before the program that, you know, especially for somebody like me, I'm an extrovert to an extreme. I need people. I feed off of people. I need that energy. And to not have that, you know, the cats do not really carry on a good conversation with me.
No, they don't.
Yeah, one of them does, but you know,
oh, really?
Yeah, she's always yelling at me. But you know, it is bringing up this whole different, you know, as you said, you know, when we figure out, okay, this is our new normal, or as I love to call it, here's another word for you, normal. Our normal, it is going to cause stress because we're not doing what we used to do.
Exactly.
We're not networking. We're not going into that office. We're not doing all of those things.
So how flexible, it really tests flexibility, because people who tended to be, I think, in their nature, flexible, or who have learned how to be flexible and kind of go with the flow, whether that flow is, because some people said to me, what do you mean go with the flow? What if it's bad? Well, you're still going to go with the flow. It's just not flowing in your direction.
Yeah.
But if you can figure out how to navigate the rapid.
How do you get that little side thing going?
Exactly. Then you're going to be in the better shape. I think the people who are probably having the worst time of it are people who are very structured, rigid, and inflexible in all their layers. So if they're able to manage to get some flexibility in their physical layer, in their physical body, it'll reverberate up the other layers.
Yeah. And I mean, clearly there are people who, when they work, they like that structure. They like to start at a certain time. They like to, I worked with a woman like that, and we were in an agency, an ad agency. Now, an ad agency is one of the most wonkadoodle places in the world. Nothing is the same every 15 minutes. And unfortunately, this woman needed structure. She needed to know what was going to happen at 1:02. And, and it was just not going to be that way. And so she didn't last, but she went to a corporation that really did that. I'm obviously clearly
both. I think you can be both, because I am a person who likes a certain amount of structure. I like to start on time. I like to end on time. If I decide
because it helps you plan your day.
Project, then I am going to finish that project. However, during whatever happening while I am doing that, let's say I've got an appointment scheduled for a certain time, and the person doesn't show up. Okay, so I have to flow with that. And if something goes wrong with the project and I get blocked, I have to flow with that. So to me, a lot of these things, it's not either or. For me, it's both and it's being able to figure out how can I manage the both and still stay moderately serene.
And for a lot of people, I think they are making changes. I mean, they're changing jobs. Some of them obviously didn't have the choice. But a lot of other people are really, I've stopped hearing people saying this is horrible and awful. They figured out, hey, this isn't bad. I think so many people went, I actually, it's okay if I don't get up till 9 o'clock in the morning, but I'm working at midnight. And as long as I get the work done, my boss is fine with that. All of these various things. Plus, it was interesting. I did a Zoom thing earlier today with a group of people. We did we networked together, and it was a wonderful networking group. When I started attending when I first moved here, so it was 8 years ago, and we truly developed friendships. And it was very good because we also did business with everybody in the group, and there was only 10, 15 people. So and we had insurance, we had HVAC. I mean, all these various things, and then, but it's been about 3 years ago, the group, disbanded and everything. And I had a dream that we did a Zoom call, and I woke up and I thought, self, there's a reason you had that dream. You have the technology. And so I contacted everybody, and they were like, oh my gosh, we would love it. And so we did that today. And, part of what we talked about was just how much we missed each other. And we really want to continue this. And I totally lost where I was going with this, but it really was it was a fabulous way to reconnect with people. And if we'd been business as usual that we were, this year, last year, we wouldn't have done this, and so this was a great opportunity to get back together, to do some of those things. And that's what I've seen a lot of people doing is like, like I've reconnected with people that I hadn't seen in years. I reconnected with somebody that I knew when I was 6
Oh,
and he
wow.
was 7.
Yeah.
And so it was, 20 years ago. And, and that's just been an absolute delight. So,
Sure.
we're adapting, we're figuring out,
Absolutely.
hey,
In my groups that I used to meet with in person, we have managed to figure out Zoom. I don't do Zoom classes, Zoom yoga classes, because I'm not comfortable with the technology. And if somebody were to set it up for me, I'd be fine. However, my writers group, my book group, my family, and my professional groups, everything has been on Zoom. And actually for me as an introvert, I find it's easier to be seen and heard, because in-person groups, people like me that have trouble kind of, because we have to process things in our head before we get them out. And by the time we've done that, the group has moved on off to something else. But with Zoom, because only one person can talk at a time without somebody else saying you need to mute yourself, it's much easier to be heard, and you're being seen because your picture's up there. So it has its benefits. But I'm like you. I mean, I can't wait to get back in person with a lot of people, and it'll happen, and we'll just have to be okay with it until then.
And the cool thing is, this new world is also going to include a lot of this technology. With the group that I was, talking to this morning, I mean, we're going to meet again. Because today was just what you've been up to for the last, 3 years type of thing, but we are going to meet again. And because of the technology, it's much easier. We're not having to drive. We're not having, so it's an hour as opposed to 2 or 3 hours. And I think that's one of the big benefits to all of this is, and clearly for people who are working from home, they're not commuting, all of those various things. And I don't even remember. My car right now is not running because I haven't started it frequently enough. So the battery's died. Because we take my husband's car.
Sure.
And so it's like, do we need 2 cars? So we're saving money, all of these various things. But one of the cool things about the fact that, okay, so many people are home is we do have the ability to do some of these self-awareness things that you teach. We're not in the cubicle with somebody going, what you doing? And you've got a lot of exercises in your book, things like that, and you can stop and do those.
Absolutely.
And and so I think that's definitely a benefit to this. And so hopefully that will be something that a lot of people discover.
Yeah. And while you were talking about being at home, I was thinking about the people who have lost their jobs and the people who don't know where their next meal is going to come from, and the people who are really feeling stressed out by all of it and don't know whether they're going to be evicted or not. And although they're not technically business people, I have been hearing stories about how people who do have jobs and people who do run businesses, particularly the restaurant business, have been stepping into that void. And the person I'm thinking about, well, 2 people right off the top of my head is Jose Andres. I don't know if you've heard of him. He runs World Central Kitchen.
Oh, yes. So they've been feeding.
He raises money and solicits other restaurateurs and pays them to feed people in their community.
They've been taking care of people who are struggling.
A wonderful way to pay it forward. So in terms of the restaurant world, that man and the people who work with him are probably have inched up on the layers of self-awareness there, because they're saying, I'm okay. I need to do something to help people who are struggling.
And I think that is something that goes along with that self-awareness is recognizing who needs help.
Absolutely.
And whether it's just, hey, what can I do for you today? Or, do I need to make a phone call? A variety of things, but that is kind of the nice thing about this is it's put us in a place to really be more aware of, the people around us.
Yeah. I walk 3 times a week at the mall with a friend of mine. because I used to teach a class at the Y called Silver Sneakers. So everybody was over the age of 55, and you make friends when you do that. And then the pandemic hit, or as we like to call it, the pandemic.
Yes.
It hit. And so with that class ended, at least she and I decided, well, we're going to walk at the mall 3 times a week. So she's a real giver, and she talks a lot about how she makes calls to people who are shut in, and how she goes and picks up her friends who need to go grocery shopping. They're in their 80s and might not have a car. And I was feeling kind of bad about that because I don't do that.
You got a little guilty.
Then I realized, okay, I'm no Mother Teresa, but I can write a check. So I immediately found several organizations that do those same things, and I write a check. So we can all find some way to.
We can find our space that we fit into.
Exactly.
Yeah, because when we all know that if we try and put that round peg in that square hole,
it ain't gonna work.
No, we just get headaches.
That's right.
Yeah. So cool. Right. Well, I want to talk more about the 5th layer of self-awareness, and that's bliss.
Yes.
Because I think that's probably one of the ones that people go, yeah, right.
Exactly.
But and that's the really frou-frou part. But it's, and as you said, they all go together. So it's not that it's the most important just because it's 5th. So talk to us more about what bliss really is.
Bliss is basically something that you connect to that's larger than yourself. And it could be, some people find bliss in religion, some find it in a spiritual path, some find it in, I like to say, a healthy passion for a healthy hobby, or just spending time in nature. Because when you talk to people about that, it can be very personal, and you don't want to get up in their business, as they say. So you just simply ask them, well, what brings you joy? What makes you feel absolutely wonderful? Have you ever had times in your life where you just lost sight of yourself? And I remember the first time it happened to me. I was 12 years old. We were visiting my mother's friends in Maine, Damariscotta, and they took us on a hike up Mount McGuntacook. And I was bitching and moaning about having to walk uphill and do all that
stuff. Bugs.
And when we got to the top, I was like, I lost my 12-year-old self. Time totally stopped. It was magical. And so those moments can happen to us. We don't necessarily cause them to happen.
Right.
We set the stage. For instance, like I was mentioning before, in terms of meditation, you set the stage and then you wait. Sometimes it's grace that happens when you have those moments. Like if you're involved in a hobby that you care about, whether it's art or carpentry, I'm sure that there are times that everybody who's listening here has had those moments when they were like, oh, where did the time go? I don't remember thinking about anything. So that's bliss. And Joseph Campbell, he was a mystic and a storyteller and a professor. And he said in one of his books that if we want to attract bliss to us, we need to set up bliss stations. And he said that could be a time, it could be a place in your house. It could be a time where the TV's off, you're not listening to the radio, you're not talking to anybody, you're going to stop being a human doing, and you're going to become a human being. And just for those few moments, you just wait. And sometimes bliss comes and sometimes it doesn't, but at the very worst, you've had a moment of silent contemplation, which can be very difficult for many of us.
Yeah. I mean, those little voices in my brain, it's real hard to get them to calm down.
Exactly. And I was mentioning before, at the end of most yoga classes and private sessions, there should be at least, hopefully at least 10 minutes where you're just relaxing on the ground. Sometimes you play music is played, sometimes it's not, but the instructions are usually see if you can release from 4 of your 5 senses. If your eyes are closed, if your palms are up, You're not touching anything.
Mm-hmm.
Your sense of smell and taste, just kind of let them go. Keep the sense of hearing either to this voice of the instructor or the music that's playing, and you just allow yourself to drift. And that's a bliss station at the end of every yoga class. And shoot, you can do that when we're finished here. You can just lie down on the floor, cover yourself up, be warm, put on some nice music, set a timer for 10 minutes, zone out.
Right. And I mean, think about people doing that at the office. Long gone are the days of the 15-minute break when people all went dashing outside to smoke, right?
Yes.
And now, I mean, you could do the same thing, 10 o'clock every morning, 3 o'clock every afternoon. You're just like, no, this is my time.
That's right.
It's interesting. I've recently interviewed somebody on the program about boundaries. And, one of the important things is that everybody else knows those boundaries. So it's like, okay, this is my time, unless you're bleeding to death.
Thank you.
I get 15 minutes.
Exactly.
And then you tell them, and then we'll go have cookies. I mean, especially if they're, they understand, or, but yeah, set those boundaries so that people understand that this is your time. Absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the most important things is we get so caught up in everything that's around us. And, and even, especially I think as women trying to do everything that's around us, that we forget that we need time. And I mean, really 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we ought to be able to find 10 or 15 minutes that we can carve out.
I always recommend this, whether you're working in the mall, being stressed out at home, there's one place you can go to be alone. And that is the bathroom.
Except those cats come and stand outside, go,
the toilet can be a wonderful bliss station. You just close the door, set the latch, sit down and take your 10 minutes, or you can even do physical exercises because that's what I used to do when I was working full time. And so absolutely. You can find a bliss station. You can make it with you, make it up as you go.
Because, if and when we're back in the environments where we're in cubicle land, all of those various things, you probably can't do that sitting at your desk, but you can go into the bathroom.
Absolutely.
And we're not talking a half hour.
Meditation stall.
Right. And so that's where that comes in. But it's all about being open to that. We all are friends with, know people related to, whatever, that they like being in a state of worry. And I mean, I actually had this conversation with my mom the other day. She's, the political transition is a little difficult for her and she's worried about it. And I said, okay, why are you worrying? What's going to happen? Well, I don't know. Well, if you don't know what's going to happen, how can you be worrying about it? Well, I have to worry about it. No, you don't. And I finally gave up. She's 88. But there are people that, they relish in, like that man that I worked for.
Why?
I mean,
because it kicks up adrenaline.
Adrenaline
gets you to go. Yeah. And then sometimes that calming down can be scary because you're like, I have nothing to worry about. What am I going to do?
Oh yeah. My mom worries that she doesn't have something to worry about. And I'm like, whatever. And I think that's a big part of, that there are things that we need to be concerned about, things that we need to worry about, but those things that we can let go.
Right.
We need to let go.
Things are not in our control.
Right.
What happens in Washington, D.C., except for the times we go into the poll to vote or send in a mail-in ballot, that's the only thing we really truly have control over. So sit back with a bag of popcorn. Like recently at the most recent inauguration, it was pearls and popcorn. So I had pearls to honor Kamala Harris and I had my popcorn in the other hand. Pearls and popcorn.
Right. Yeah. And that, I mean, but a big part of that ceremony was the music.
Oh,
and I mean that, I just got chills right there. And that just, to me, music has always been a very important part of my life. And so, to have that, that was, they clearly understood that this was something, the organizers understood that helps, it helps heal people. And, we've certainly seen that. I do a lot of work with seniors, how music, especially with say Alzheimer's, and how that can really affect people. And so, again, do your 10 minutes, put your little iPod in, listen to something, and I mean, for some people, I mean, that could be AC/DC.
Yeah.
But, that's not going to relax me, but that might be what, and so it's interesting, but find those things.
Absolutely.
And take that time, and you will be better in your personal and in your professional life.
And besides, especially music is energy. And if we are energy and we vibrate to a certain type of music, it is going to soothe if there's a match. And I think most people know what type of music they enjoy, what type of music relaxes them, and what type of music gets them like this. Like for me, it's heavy metal. I cannot, cannot do that at all. But I can dance to pretty much everything but heavy metal.
It's funny. I typically have noise. I have music, I have a TV, whatever going on. And I've always been like that. And I'm sure part of that is because my brain is going 900 miles an hour. But I had a guy one time, now we did not share an office. So this was not, but I always had music on, just whatever the light rock station was, I think was probably what it was. And he informed me that I needed that because my self-esteem was so low. And I looked at him and I said, "You're a dork." Got to be one of the strangest things, but and
you know what he was projecting. He was probably talking about himself.
Right. He couldn't focus, and my husband is the exact opposite. He needs quiet, and so there are times where I have to go and hide or put on headphones. I mean, there's all of these various things, but we make do with these things. But oh my gosh, Beth. We have chatted. We have filled the hour. This is so wonderful. But tell people how they can work with you, how they can find your book, and how they connect with you.
Okay. My website is bethgibbs.com.
That's pretty easy.
That's pretty easy. The book, there's a link to the book page on my website. If they don't want to bother with that, just go straight to Amazon and type in Enlighten Up with an exclamation point, and the cover will pop up. And on my website, they can sign up for my newsletter, or if they want me to do some kind of teaching or do a workshop over Zoom, of course, for the time foreseeable, they can contact me through there. Absolutely.
I love it. And again, it's BethGibbs.com. Two B's.
BIBBS.com.
I love it. Well, and your connection information is there, all of those various things.
Absolutely. Perfect. Everything's on the website. Thank you, my web designer, because I don't do any of that technical stuff.
Oh, see, I love tinkering.
You learn what you're good at and you pay for what you're not.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is one of the things that we talk an awful lot about on this program is, and I tell people, if it takes me longer than 15 minutes, I should probably outsource it.
There you
go.
Now,
playing on websites, I like tinkering. I like doing that part. But I also have the people that a very good friend of mine who's I've broken it and I need help because, it's like, I called him the other day and I said, I could spend several hours and probably figure it out. You can do it in 5 minutes.
That's right.
And he did. He's like, oh, here's what he said. You broke it again. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
So because I've been rebranding and all sorts of stuff. Cool.
Sure.
Well, Beth, this really has been just absolutely delightful. We've learned so much, and so I strongly encourage people to buy your book, to connect with you online, because again, this is something that when our soul and our heart are healthy, we can conquer the world. And so that is what is so important about this. And that's why I love talking about it. But do you have any final thoughts for everyone?
Just remember that when you cultivate your self-awareness, you find it much easier to reach clarity, contentment, and resilience in our complicated world. And then when you do that, you will make better decisions and you will find peace for the things that you cannot change. And there are those things in our lives that we're all going to face that we cannot change, but we can find a way to accept them and be at peace.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having just the most delightful conversation with Beth Gibbs. And until next time, everyone have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.